When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs.
In all of science, we're looking for a balance between data and theory. You don't have to delude yourself with Iron Age fairy tales.
The same spiritual fulfillment that people find in religion can be found in science by coming to know, if you will, the mind of God.
The real world, as it actually is not evil. It's remarkable. And the way to understand the physical world is to use science.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold. Teach a man to reason and he'll think for a lifetime. Think for a lifetime.
Do you want to kick off?
Well, I think the first thing is to welcome everybody to the first Freethought Friday podcast, and hosted by Ciarán and Floinn.
That's me. And Robert Coyle.
And that's me.
So the point of this podcast, I suppose, is to give the Freethought community in Ireland an opportunity to listen to content that's relevant to them and to promote events that are going on in the Freethought community, and of course, most importantly, to promote free thinking, which is we think fundamental to improving everything in our society and indeed in the world over.
Yeah. I mean, helping people. I mean, I think it's safe to say that we've both decided we want to recruit new free thinkers.
Definitely.
This podcast's primary objective is to make more new free thinkers.
Absolutely,
exactly.
Absolutely. Sorely needed. Needed.
Definitely. I mean, it's something that we've both been through ourselves. I'm not sure I would call myself a free thinker yet. It's something I think you aspire to.
Yes. We could use a religious idea comes to mind here.
I was going to use karate.
Okay, that could work too. Yes, either of those. I was going to say there's one of my favourite quotes from an English poet is, "If our reach does not exceed our grasp, then what is heaven for?" But perhaps in a little lesser religious tone, it is always good to try to aspire towards improving yourself, constantly improving yourself. And I agree. I think I perhaps use the phrase aspiring free thinker.
Yes.
So trying to get as close to a pure free thinker as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I, I would consider myself about 8% of Sam Harris at the moment. I'm hoping to maybe get that up to maybe a 90% thing over the next decade.
Are you going to do? I was going to say the karate. That he doesn't do karate, but are you going to do any of the martial arts?
Lots of drugs and meditation.
And
I'm following Sam's path here.
All right. well, he's laid out a very good path. He's laid out a very, very good path for that. That's excellent. So, how can I ask you then, Robert? How did you get into all of this? How did you become a free thinker? Or do you, by the way, I have no problem with labels, so I'm an atheist, I'm a secularist, I'm a humanist, I'm a skeptic. Well, I'm trying to be a skeptic, and I think I like free thinker as a term. But do you consider yourself one of those, and was it through one of those that you came to free thought, or you think they're all the same? Or?
Yeah, it would have come through atheism. I would have become an atheist first, and then atheism introduced me to the scientific method and to think about that, which is, if I could just say, is a shocking indictment of our education system, that in my mid-30s, having been someone who went down the business and art route in school, so I did art, economics and accountancy for my leaving cert, and then I went and I studied marketing in college, I had never come across the scientific method of thinking. I would have done honours maths. That never introduced me to it. That would have introduced obviously concepts and precepts of logic.
Yeah.
I'm guessing because I was educated by the Jesuits, they weren't all that up on critical thinking
critical
and free thinking.
No, possibly didn't want that. Yes. making far less converts than
I'm thinking that if they put that in, that's like the dude who engineered the thermal exhaust port into the Death Star 2. It's like, you did what? That's how they did it the last time.
That's true. That's very true.
How about we have central heating? How about solar? Okay, we're a space station. We'll go
surrounded by stars.
Yeah.
You think they'd not make the same mistake twice? But there you go. Excellent. So you came through it. So sorry. So you didn't experience that through the education system.
No, not at all.
It
was Richard Dawkins, and I think it was 2004. His documentary, The Root of All Evil.
Oh, right.
And it was about 15 minutes in, and he talks about there's a scene of all the believers at Lourdes.
Oh,
and
yes,
it's a candlelit vigil, and he turns and he said, and I'm paraphrasing him now, but he says something like, kind of if one man if one person believed this, we'd call them insane. When 1 million people believe it, we call it religion.
Yes.
And then he delivered, I think, which was the first fatal blow to my faith, because I would have ditched kind of, obviously literal interpretations of the Bible up until that point, and I'd moved into that kind of spiritual. I would have described myself as spiritual.
Right.
And what that meant is that, I went and got my fortune told every once in a while, because I thought there might be something in it, and I felt I understood things at a deeper level than, my silly parents who believed in heaven and hell.
Of course. Oh, they never get it right.
Exactly.
Parents are always wrong.
And when Dawkins said about the no one's ever grown a limb back at Lourdes.
Yes.
And that was it, man. Like that was the first time that my faith in there being any supreme being was fundamentally undermined.
Right.
And that made me feel very, very uncomfortable. And it took... So that would have been 2004, and then the God Delusion came out, I think, 2007, 2008.
Yeah, about that time.
In a what I think is one of the greatest ironies ever, my wife bought it for me for Christmas. Right. Let's celebrate the birth of Jesus by proving he doesn't exist.
That's a very inspired, definitely an inspired present at Christmas time. But okay, yes, excellent.
And
right.
Page 54 or page 58.
All right, the page numbers.
I know,
okay,
because it literally was. I mean, to use a religious analogy, it was my road to Damascus moment. And there's a line in it where it goes, where he's paraphrasing. I think it's Gray, AJ Gray or Grayling, and he says, "What is the use of a God who does no miracles and answers no prayers?" And it was literally like, shite, I've been wrong all this time. Literally, it all just fell. It just fell away. And I even like without being too gross. I'm trying to paint a word picture for you here. I was in my dressing gown. I was I'd had my breakfast. I was in the toilet having a little bit of a read, as it was. As
you do. Yes.
Yeah,
we all do it.
That's it.
We have to be honest about that.
Legs going pink and numb from kneeling on it, holding the book up, right? And this thing happened, and I actually stood up.
Right.
Like it was that powerful. It was a profound, and it was like I'd been given a shock. Like it was, and obviously I hadn't, but it was a huge thing. And literally, I walked out, and I called my wife in. And I went like, I don't believe in God anymore. And she was like, what do you mean? And I went, he doesn't exist. What's the point? Because that was it. Because I'd always like I'd gone from being like kind of I used to say like with an air of superiority. I don't believe in that intercessionary God. That silly God. That idiots pray to.
Yeah. To find the car keys or that spot nearest the shop. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. I believe that God has this divine plan for us, and it just sounds like very being a human. His plan looks like very, very complicated jazz, right? You can't understand it.
No. But
if you step back further enough, it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And then I realized that was just crap.
Yeah.
So that was mine.
I think I agree with Eddie Izzard's the God random. If it was the God random, I'll make badgers and bok choy and helicopters and jam and then and only then might it make sense, and it only makes sense because none of that makes sense. So it's senseless in a senseless universe. But it doesn't make any sense at all. So it's interesting that you mentioned the God delusion. That I think from that point, I certainly had misunderstood atheism. I was beginning to. Sorry, I should say from that point when I read it, which would have been 2010. Yeah. So actually, I'll go all the way back.
Tell us your story, Ciarán.
I'll tell you. Well, way back in in the Stone Age. No, I was raised by two, I would say, devout Catholics, who definitely would have their own interpretation of Catholicism. That is to say that they do believe it. I think they believe it to a point, and it's very important to them, and they go to Mass weekly.
Yeah.
And we, myself and my three brothers, all knew that it was very important to them, and they wanted it to be important to us, but they didn't want it to be more important to us than what we wanted ourselves. And that was very clear and made very clear to us from a very early age. So that was actually quite fantastic, because we never felt too pressurized that we had to believe, and certainly
so they allowed you to question. It wasn't like, it was very much a post-Vatican II Catholicism.
Yes, very much so. Very
it's
much
all
so.
cool. Let's listen to Taizé music and,
and
ask questions of each other.
They weren't big on questioning, but they had no problem if we decided to question, just not them. And that is to say that if we wanted to find our own way, they were absolutely happy with that. As my two younger and older brothers did.
When you say find your own way, was there implied provided it's Catholicism?
No, never.
That's
No.
cool.
There was never any sense of it must be Catholicism, or even that it must be a religion. But certainly it was. They desired it. They certainly desired and preferred if we did. My older brother, who is 2 years older than me, was the first to kind of go in around 12, 13. I don't really want to go to Mass anymore, and we all obviously had to go to Mass when we were younger. So my mother gave him permission. It was definitely before 15, I think, that if he didn't want to go, he didn't have to go, and that was that. She was afraid it would impact me, no doubt. From her point of view, it was a fear, and it didn't. In fact, quite the opposite. I was incredibly religious and remained so up until I was about 23, 24.
When I define
25.
incredibly,
I should, because I look back.
There's a plane going overhead, by the way, which, by the way, proves the laws of aerodynamics, the internal combustion engine, various technologies that are wireless, all stuff that you can't find in the Bible.
No,
which apparently was written by the creator of the universe.
Yes, none of that is there, including things like
don't boil milk, do boil milk, should I say?
Washing hands, before you give birth. These kind of things that we only seem to discover in the mid 1800s. But anyway, so at the time, because I suppose I wasn't looking at it objectively. If I look at it objectively, I see it differently. But at the time, I thought I was standard Catholic. I certainly wasn't conservative in my outlook of social things and cultural things, but I would have been very traditional. In fact, I quite often used previously, and even to a point, used the word traditional to describe myself. I love tradition, but what I found, and I think why I gravitated towards, or why I continued to gravitate towards the Catholic Church, was the structure. And I love structure. It's one of the reasons why I studied mathematics and studied music, and I think that structure helped me. I suppose just get through my teenage years. And my teenage years were actually difficult. Ironically, probably because of the Catholicism, because I'm gay, and that was a serious problem for me to have to deal with.
Oh no! May I ask you? Actually,
any questions?
Let me ask you a question that I'm going to ask you later, but let's not interrupt your narrative. And what I want to ask you was, when you became aware, not because I'm sure you've been aware of your sexuality all your life, but when you became aware that it was in conflict with your belief, which you held. So I'd like to come back to that later, if that's okay with you. Great.
Yes. Yeah. And I think certainly that's very important as the marker, as one of the first markers. In fact, I always put it down as of my very long trip out of a religious belief. But anyway, so that was my teenage years, and I remained strongly Catholic without it being I never imposed it on anybody. I never said, well, I'm Catholic and whatever. But I had only met my first Protestant, and I have to say that quietly, because my parents always, when they said Protestant, they whispered it as if it was some dirty thing.
Like and Voldemort.
Yeah, it was. I watch Harry Potter, and it's very. We can't speak his name. He's a Protestant. Yeah. So I met my first Protestant. His name was Carl. In school, he was the only Protestant in our class, and
actually, the only gay in the class, not the only Protestant in the class.
Yeah.
See, that's what they should have done with the Little Britain movie.
They really should. absolutely the only gay in the village, only Protestant in the village. But it is interesting. It was in second year in secondary school when I was learning about the Reformation, and when understanding, I didn't know what the Reformation was, the Protestant was, and then I understood. It was explained to me the concepts of consubstantiation and transubstantiation, and I remember having a moment at 14, 15 going, that's what this is all about. Because for me, the big impact of Protestantism and Catholicism was Northern Ireland. That's what I remember constantly. Northern Ireland, growing up, sitting down, watching UTV and hearing bomb after bomb after bomb.
And very much, I think, if you were Catholic, the unwritten kind of message was, when regarding Ulster, was Catholics good, Protestants bad. Like, and very much it was like cowboys and Indians. It was
very much so.
Bad guys wear orange.
Yes, bad guys. Absolutely. And it was, that sense was definitely imparted upon me. No doubt it was imparted on my parents. And yet it conflicted with my parents' sense of judge not lest ye be judged. They very much embodied that, and they very much still live that. And I when they do say that, it's almost as if they say it because they know they have to say it, and I see a struggle in their eyes that they want to mean it, but I know that they find it difficult. They really wish everyone were Catholic, and they really wish, and they really do. Some part of them really do think that everyone else is wrong. But
that's another one of those kind of those Catholic, I don't know, I'd call them like a Chinese finger puzzles and stuff. Judge not lest ye be judged. Our brain is designed to judge. Our brain is designed to put things into hierarchies. You can't walk around and not, today I'm going to judge walking across the road into traffic is the thing I'm going to do today.
Absolutely.
And how dare you judge me
back for it? Yes.
Exactly.
And indeed, this is part of our problem, I think, in relation to where our liberal mindset. I mean, I would consider myself a liberal in many ways, but in general, where liberalism has gone, where it's complete. It's become so tolerant. It's become tolerant of intolerance, and thinks that judging intolerance as a bad thing is something we shouldn't be doing. When of course we should be doing it. But
actually, that again, sorry to interrupt.
Sure, no problem.
But this is one of the things that we talked about. Listeners to this podcast should be very aware of this thing. This is not going to be a balanced podcast.
No,
we are not going to be
not.
We're going to slag off kind of people who we don't think, and we're going to ask them for their opinion. No, we're not. We are going to judge stuff based on the precepts of the scientific method. We're going to get some of that wrong, and free thought, and we're going to get that wrong as well, and we're not going to apologize for it, and that's the way it goes. So if you're looking for balance, unsubscribe now.
Yes, this is not a balanced show. This is definitely for freethinkers. So, and as you said, an important thing that you said, and we'll come back to that later, we will get it wrong. Not we might get it wrong, we will get it wrong. And we learn by people correcting us, peer reviewing us. So that's great. We definitely will. We will welcome that.
We welcome it. It gets us closer to being right.
Absolutely, definitely. So I've rambled a bit, but I'll try and get through the story a little faster. So certainly during my teenage years, there was some conflict there, but I remained Catholic. I was in a Catholic home, and I went to Mass without fail every single Sunday, and I learned a term towards the last year, or in the last year of my my education in school, in our religion class, which was taught by an atheist. Although all he could do was tell us he was an atheist, and that was the end of that. We didn't know what it meant. But and that was a legalistic Catholic. And I think I was a legalistic Catholic. That is, I subscribed to the structure. I liked the structure. I liked the not even the ideas. I don't even think I liked the ideas. I think I just liked the fact that the ideas were wrapped in structure, and everything else then was a little wishy-washy, and I kind of followed it and kind of didn't. But so certainly up until my mid-teens, I was still going to confession, and then I did stop that. But then if I missed Mass, it would bother me, and I tried to make sure that I didn't. So it was definitely a part of my life. Towards then the latter end of my teenage years and the beginning of my early 20s, when I was beginning to consider going out, I wasn't really going out because I hadn't come out yet. I started noticing that my faith was waning, and this was a source of conflict for me. At the same time, I was studying my music degree in Maynooth University, which for the first year was St. Patrick's College Maynooth, and then moved into NUI Maynooth as a secular, non-religious institution. And during that time, I was learning how the most amazing, beautiful music, and understanding, in fact, a lot of the history of the church, because it's tied in with classical music, of how that's created, and beginning to love that and have a greater appreciation for that, a kind of cultural Catholicism history, you know. And at the same time, I noticed myself in Mass on a Sunday listening to the priests preach and go, I don't agree with that. Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
So there was this conflict occurring. So
I get it. I know. And I've certainly heard other people kind of talk about this, which is like when you come across just the majesty and the beauty of art, like some of the great art, and sponsored and paid for by the church, because, as people said, they were the only game in town at the time, right? And you have a moment of transcendence, whether it's kind of the Madonna and Child or whatever it happens to be, some religious So you kind of go, well, okay, great. So religion must be fantastic, because look at how I'm feeling when I see this Michelangelo or this Leonardo, or I listen to this music. When I listen to Requiem, and just like, it's just achingly gorgeous. Yeah. And then you go and you just get given out to by some wizened raisin of a bitter virgin, and it's just like, man, it's like going from HD to fucking puppet signals or something like that. It's just just so not transcendent
at all.
Mass just ain't transcendent.
No, at all. No, absolutely not. And I certainly was feeling that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to see if I could try to inject some transcendence into my experience. So I was forced, as all first-year music students in Maynooth were required to do, to join the choir, the university choir, and that was an amazing and transformative experience. Mostly, I would imagine, for the people who were forced to listen to me sing, because I was terrible then, and that hasn't improved. But it was a requirement. I think they've changed.
Where's
that now.
your God now?
Yeah.
Huh?
I remember a number of things. Perhaps I won't mention names just yet. But with the professor of music at the time, and I'm sure people will know who he is. He used to come in to Callan Hall, where they did the rehearsals on Mondays and Thursday nights, and he would go, ladies and gentlemen, and tenors, of which I was one. Or he would, and I didn't know, I had no idea what he was referring to, but he did say, I think I remember one time, gentlemen, you sound like something from the George on a Sunday night. And again, I didn't even know what the George was at that time, even though
he did, apparently.
Yeah, but he did. That's a whole other question. But anyway, from that experience, I decided to actually join the local church choir, and they were a church choir. Yeah. So that's their passion was undeniable, and their dedication to it was undeniable. Their singing was okay, but it was a church choir, and I was the youngest person. I joined when I was 21, and I was the youngest person by 21 years. The next guy was 42, who I befriended actually for a short while, and then after that it was 60s going up to 80s and 90s, and it was actually a fantastic experience in many ways, because it kept me. Well, I'm not saying this was a good thing, but certainly its objective was to keep me in Mass, and I did for another 2 or 3 years. But I just learned an awful lot in relation to, in fact, elderly people as well, and because I just had no interaction, and it was great. It was really great, and they were wonderful people, and whether they believed or not, I don't know. Some of them certainly did, and some of them I think were so-so. Yeah. But it was fantastic. I mean, certainly to me, it solidified that religion builds community, and community is good. And I do think religion builds community, and I do think community is good.
Religion is worthwhile.
But I understand now, unfortunately, it's a byproduct, and unfortunately, with the good comes some bad of that, and there's better ways of building community. But anyway, that brought me into my 20s, and by the time I was in my 20s, I eventually came out to my parents, and it was the first time my mother ever uttered the words. When I told her that I was gay, and she asked me why it took so long to tell her, I said I was afraid, because she's quite Catholic, and I said that, you're quite Catholic, and I wasn't sure how you'd react. And she said to me, the church is wrong about that. That's the first and last time she's ever
love your
used
ma.
the word.
I love your ma.
First
Your
and
ma's
last time she's ever
phenomenal.
used those words. So I was very impressed with that. And
Do you mind me asking, how old is your mother?
she's now in her, goodness, I should know, the 70s.
Yeah.
Yes, she is, and
Yeah.
she was 70 last year.
And
so-
my ma would be in her late 70s, early 80s, and I know my mum holds the same opinion because a cousin of mine was gay, and I say was because he's dead now,
Right.
and she always kind of like he was he was a flaming queen when he was 4.
Right. Okay. So there was no doubt in that case.
He used to
There's no
make
doubt.
skirts out of seaweed.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And do
quite a
hula
skill.
dancing
It's
when he
quite a
was
skill.
4.
I like
when we
it.
were
I
on
like it.
holidays.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there was no doubt.
No doubt.
There
yeah.
was no doubt where Mark was going.
Right.
It was just, and my mum, my mother, I remember talking to her about it because myself and Mark got very, very close before he died. And my mum said she would have followed the church's thinking about homosexuality
Right.
until she saw Mark.
Yes.
Because she'd literally never met a gay person before.
Yeah.
She would have met, kind of stereotypical, kind of, let's say, effeminate men or something like that, kind of later on. But this would have been the 50s and the 60s in
60s,
Ireland.
yeah, yes,
and
yeah.
this is like it was illegal to
Illegal,
be who you
yes, right up to 93, 1993.
Which is,
It disturbed. I tell people this, and they, what do they mean? What do you mean it was illegal to be gay?
Yeah.
But of course, this goes on today, and it was still being implemented. But anyway, yes. So that's exactly. I think my mother may or may not have met. Well, I certainly know she did meet gay people in her life. She just may or may not have known that they were. But
Did they know that you were? Like, has that ever come up in conversation?
do you know what? We haven't really discussed it.
Okay.
I suspect, given that the reaction from her was so calm, I imagine they probably did know or suspected greatly. I had told my dad,
Did you
believe it or not,
girls home and stuff like
no,
that?
well, I was surrounded by girls.
Right.
All from I was a young kid all the way up to teenage years, and I had brought new girls home, and they certainly had aspirations for each and every single one of them, but those died a quick death once.
Not
that
up to our
conversation was-
Ciarán's high standards. Another one leaves
Another one.
unhappily down the
What?
driveway.
What he's finding the wrong.
Don't you
the wrong-
worry, Ciarán. Mrs. Wright's out there for
She's
you
out
someday.
there. So yes, so that was an interesting one. But believe it or not, so I suppose I better end with this. The story will go on forever, but definitely the crack had. As I said, college was very conflicting in many cases because I was getting this fantastic history and an even richer cultural experience than I had before, and it was simply by a matter of history and the fact that I was in Maynooth, surrounded by religion. At the same time, Ireland was changing massively. Maynooth University changed from my first year to second year. I was in a Catholic college to a secular university within the space of a year. My own opinions started to change and whatever else. But what happened, believe it or not, definitely I always put down as the defining moment at the beginning of this, is in first year we did a course in college called World History, which was 10,000 years, 12,000 years in fact, of human history in 24 lectures, and that is quite a feat to do. And the lecturer, Dr. Carl King, decided, which was controversial at the time in Ireland, to do at least 1 or 2 lectures on the Arabian Empire. So she picked 5 civilizations and wanted to show the similarities between all the civilizations. So all the civilizations had a governance, a growing governance that kind of spawned in from the original beginnings of one, a bureaucracy. They all had a religious class which held most of the power and happened to be the religion of the time. They had poor people, and so she was kind of introducing us to the idea of social history, which was beginning to get bigger in Ireland. It was bigger in other countries, I think, prior to that. So just because most history tends to be purely political. So, but anyway, in that she explained to the class about how the Quran got interwoven into what became then the Persian Empire. Yeah. And she mentioned one particular part of one of the lectures was about the Quranic law in relation to one man to is it 7 women? I think the number may be different, and of course it's not implemented by all Muslims everywhere, but that was historically, that did occur at the time, and it was something implemented by the women of the time and not the men. And it was just about the time when the Quran was written. And basically what happened is in what is now Saudi Arabia, where the Persian Empire was beginning to spring from, there were a series of massive wars in which the male population was completely decimated. And as a result of that, the women who were now running the society realized that genetically they had to spread themselves around in order to ensure that the civilization survived. So they implemented the law, or the idea that they should have it should be one man to seven women. That then got written into the Quran. And the point our lecturer was making, yes, of course, by dudes, yes. And the point, of course, our lecturer was making was, this is how a historical fact became a religious requirement.
Excellent.
And that was the moment when I realized, if that happened 1600 years ago, or 1400 years ago, why could it not have happened 2000 years ago in relation to homosexuality? And then, so that certainly started getting the ball rolling. So yes, and from then on it was as slow. I became an aspiring Buddhist. I think right up to the point where I had my first Facebook page, or my Facebook page when I first created it, I put down aspiring Buddhist.
I think anyone who listened to Enya did.
And I most certainly did listen to Enya for a while. So I was aspiring Buddhist, and I've taken a couple of things from it. But one of the things I really liked about Buddhism when I was going through it, at least Western Buddhism, I realise it's now not the same as Buddhism as practiced in other countries, is that it kept saying you should try this out and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, dump it. So that struck me as very scientific. And in fact, the books I was reading about Buddhism were actually comparing it to the scientific method. And no doubt there was an element of it. And so what I realised a little while after was I was attracted to that, and then the mysteriousism of it being a new idea and a new religion. But I eventually dumped that, and it was slow but sure. And then I read The God Delusion, and that was the end of it. I mean, certainly from seeing interviews with Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion is like the Harry Potter for atheists. Like I think so. It is a core book, a wonderful kind of piece of thought and stuff like that. And Dawkins writes. I find it very easy to read. His stuff. I mean, I've read The Selfish Gene. I haven't read any of his other stuff. I read The Selfish Gene, and I read. I'm just reading The Selfish Gene at the moment. So I'm enjoying it.
Complex. But I found it really easy. It's like he switches between nearly stream of consciousness writing and then teaching in a way that's very, very easy to assimilate. Like, I used to read it. I used to live out in Balbriggan, so it'd be like an hour and a half on the bus, coming in and out of work each way and stuff. And I used to just find myself absorbed in this stuff. And for a very dense book, it's really, really good, really well written. He's got a lovely kind of turn of phrase and stuff. So
definitely, and it's certainly I do like his writing style. I know not everyone does, but it's very distinctive, and I agree with you. I think he does have that excellent dualism where he jumps between, as you said, a very, very prosaic almost a stream of consciousness writing to I use an Irish word, a lovely teaching manner. It is fantastic.
And for anyone who doesn't know a stream of consciousness, because again we need to be aware of the fact that we may use terminology. Stream of consciousness is a form of writing whereby it's the thoughts that are inside your head, that voice that goes on inside your head all the time. Well, imagine
not the one that tells you to burn things, right? That's a different voice.
It depends on whose consciousness we're discussing here. But don't follow that voice all the time.
No, it's definitely
that's not good. But stream of consciousness writing is trying to mimic the internal thought. So it's kind of taking something and letting it kind of go off in different directions. And if you listen to your own thoughts, like kind of be silent for a moment, you just listen to the noise inside your head. That's the river of your consciousness kind of going there, and we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, in future ones, because there's an awful lot of thought about that kind of going on at the moment.
Absolutely. So I think, that's certainly my journey. I think the one phrase I will say in Dawkins' book, and again I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I can't remember it exactly, but it's his big conclusion, and his big conclusion is definitely the beginning of my entry into free thought, and this is when I got it, and it's when he says there are people in the world who consider faith to be a virtue, and there are people in the world who do not consider faith to be a virtue, and that's the line. And that has morphed into now, I use a phrase from Dr. Peter Boghossian's book, A Manual for Creating Atheists, and we'll put that in the links with this podcast. The idea where the line is, where you can fall one side or the other side of the line, or maybe directly on top of it, is faith is an unreliable epistemology. That is what freethinkers think. Believers don't think that. Believers think faith is reliable. They may not think it's reliable in all cases, but they think it's reliable in some cases. And that's equivalent to Dawkins' divide of there are people who think faith is a virtue and people who don't.
Now, explain the word epistemology.
Sure, yes,
and then put
I
it
should.
back in and explain.
Absolutely,
explain the sentence,
and it took me a while. No doubt, I'll fluff up the word epistemology a few times, but it took me a while just to say epistemology. Epistemology, it's a great word because it has pist in there.
Yeah.
Epistemology
and e.
Absolutely, it's perfect. Epistemology is the way you come to knowledge. It's the method by which you figure out what is true and what isn't true. So you could have...
Give us a tangible example.
Yes.
So let's say fire is hot.
Fire is hot, right.
Okay, so I say, Ciarán, fire is hot.
Right. So if I decide to just accept that, that could be belief-based epistemology. If I decide not to test it any further, it could be belief-based epistemology because I just could believe every single word that comes out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. But let's pretend I don't believe every single word that comes out of your mouth. But let's pretend that you and I know each other very well. I know you're a smart person. I know you've gotten things right in the past. You've probably got more things right in the past than you've gotten wrong in our relationship. Mm-hmm. So I would consider that I trust you, and that when you say something, it's likely to be true. It tends to be true.
I'm a trusted
It may not
source
be,
of
but
information.
I'm very more highly confident that because it comes from you, it's probably true. So if I did that, that's a trust-based epistemology, and we all use trust-based epistemologies all the time. When you go to a doctor and the doctor tells you what he thinks is wrong with you, and you accept that as being true, that's going to be trust-based because you don't have the medical expertise, nor do you have the time probably to go through the kind of training and gather all the experience that he or she has in order to try and see, well, is he right? Do I really have the man flu? So that would be a trust-based epistemology. When you use an app on your phone, for example, to tell you the weather, there's a whole chain of trust in there. You could maybe use an app that tells you your fortune, and the fortune might tell you whether that's a different thing. But so they would be trust-based epistemologies. Then if you said fire is hot and I said no, I don't believe you, Robert. I want you to prove it. Then you could perhaps take out a lighter and ask me to put my hand over it, and if it feels hot to me, then I would then accept that as being true. That is an evidence-based epistemology, and that's what science is about. That is what free thought is about. It's about using evidence, data, and reason and logic, and valuing that information. Valuing that more than the word of somebody or the belief in somebody or whatever else. And that's the epistemology that freethinkers use, and certainly it's the epistemology that I want to promote. But it's a difficult one. It's not one we're naturally oriented towards using,
and it becomes complicated. And this is something. This is something actually, and again, kind of for listeners here, kind of Ciarán comes more from a scientific background. I come more from a kind of a business with a very small B, not anyway, kind of a big B and stuff. And I'm a comedian, kind of at the moment, which means I'm broke. But anyway, that's fine.
Happily broke though,
right,
Robert?
Very happily broke. Very happily broke. Spiritually fulfilled. Very happily broke. And this is something that I struggle with because I don't have a scientific background. So, for instance, let's talk about the biggest scientific discovery recently, the Higgs boson.
The Higgs boson.
Right? Now, I have no idea, right, what it is. Okay.
Like us all.
Exactly. I vaguely understand that it gives things mass. Right? That's pretty much what it is. But even then, I'm really not sure. But there's a comedian, an American comedian, a guy called Joe Rogan, and Joe gave a great piece of advice for people like me who don't have a scientific background, and it was this: if you want to save time, right? If you want to save time, go find a bunch of smart people, see what they agree on, leave it at that. right? And then move on and find other stuff, because you can't verify literally every single thing.
Absolutely, it's just not going to happen.
But what you can do is you can, and again, as we used in the fire example, what you can do is you can choose a number of, let's say, trusted sources, and it should always be more than one trusted source. You should have multiple trusted sources, right? And what you can do is you can use them as a kind of a shorthand. So if, for instance, they all agree that global warming is caused by man or by humanity, then, and all of them do, we can kind of go, well, that's fair enough.
No,
and if
that's likely to be the case.
Exactly. And I think, because that's something, because I know, and this is where I call myself an aspiring free thinker, right? Because I don't have the time to go to college to go and verify that Stephen Hawking is actually correct.
Yeah.
So when Stephen Hawking says black hole radiation spinning, I kind of go,
okay,
I believe you, Stephen.
Absolutely.
But here's what it is. It's not that I'm believing Stephen Hawking per se. What I'm believing is that Stephen Hawking is a scientist, and therefore Stephen Hawking will come out and say black holes spinning radiation, and every other scientist in the world gets extra brownie points or experience points or game points or salary or whatever for proving Stephen Hawking wrong. Their job is to prove him wrong,
not to agree with
every
him, of course.
scientist's job is to try and prove every other scientist wrong, because by doing that, and all of them failing and all of them finding the same answer that Stephen Hawking has, we then extrapolate forward and going to go, you know what, if everybody finds the same thing, that's as close as we're going to get to a truth.
Yeah.
And that's what free thought is.
Absolutely.
Free thought is being free to challenge every fact that you come across, and never being scared to do it, never being scared to ask why, never being scared to kind of say, show me, explain to me, prove it to me. Now, some things are beyond proof. For instance, I cannot prove that God doesn't exist.
Yeah,
you can't prove a negative. You can't prove a negative. I can't prove that the flying spaghetti monster doesn't exist.
We all know he does. May you touch it with his noodly pentage and Parmesan be upon him.
Absolutely. Flying spaghetti monster, go look it up. You'll thank us.
You can't prove a negative.
Exactly.
Or the absence of something.
What we can prove, though, is we can prove that there's actually, and we're jumping around a lot here, and this is our first time doing this, so this is going to be a bit kind of muddly. Right. Yeah. Here's the, when it comes to atheism, and I think we both see eye to eye in this. Mm-hmm. There's what you would call traditional Catholicism, right? Which is what I would have called the intercessionary God, which was the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament, miracles, walking on water, Jesus, virgin births, raising the dead, healing the sick, Sodom and Gomorrah, all that type of stuff. So literally something that is able to defy the laws of physics, because Jesus could walk on water. Well, that's physically impossible. Okay, a human being cannot walk on water. Yeah. Okay, like it just can't. Not on water as we describe it, H2O. Just can't be done. So anyone who can actually walk on water is suspending physics or has got technology that we don't have access to. Because I'm thinking maybe, water repelling anti-grav boots or something like this, Or
maybe just ice.
Exactly, like just ice. Oh, that's a lawyer's answer. That is like Melod.
Well, technically it's water.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Should have been a lawyer.
Now, you and I don't believe in that God.
No, right? Certainly not.
Other people will talk about, oh, that's a silly God, and I would have been one of these people, and I would have said, like, oh, it's all, kind of, it's the concept of God and whatever. I don't mind about that God. That God's an irrelevancy. That God's, if you believe that's fine, mate. It's like, because that God doesn't affect the world. If you believe that God is the concept of happiness, or God is the person who set the things in motion,
it becomes a label at that point.
Exactly.
It's just, it doesn't really, it has no real meaning to it.
Yeah. What it is it's a word for the stuff you can't explain. Fair enough.
Yeah. God of the gaps, God.
Exactly. Where free thought and religion collide is in the following. It is the belief that there is a being who is in control of the laws of physics, who can revoke the laws of physics, who can change reality, who can raise someone from the dead just by willing it, who can part the Red Sea, who can lay waste to a city, who has got angels, and who, if you pray to them, and if you follow the teachings laid out in a book, you can change their behavior. So by sacrificing a goat, you can basically get God to change the plan. Now, there is no evidence for that God, and that's a God that I absolutely reject. I say there is no evidence of that. I think we agree on that.
Yeah,
and in fact, I'll go further and say that God don't exist. Just doesn't exist. And I challenge that God to either strike me dead or to show up. Because here's the point. If that happens, well, either A, I'll be dead, or B, I'll change my mind.
Absolutely, yes. And so now we're getting to the heart of the process, the heart of the free thought process. I think it's very, very important.
Yes.
That, I suppose in a free thought, the default position is skepticism. If someone makes a claim, then we demand proof.
Yeah.
As Carl Sagan would say, claims require evidence, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So the default position as a free thinker is, okay, we'll prove that. And until you do, I'm going to remain skeptical. Yeah. And it's very important, maybe that our listeners understand, and I'm sure they do, but people quite often confuse the ideas of skepticism and cynicism. They're not the same ideas. Skepticism is doubting that a particular statement is true, or reserving judgment until you have evidence in the affirmative. Whereas cynicism is just not really caring, or assuming everything's bad or nothing's going to work out, or everyone's wrong, or whatever. Yeah. So these are not the same concept. So skepticism is not a bad thing at all. Cynicism, well, we'll park that for another day.
So, and actually, if we think about it, actually, as you're talking, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem.
The parable of doubting Thomas in the New Testament is probably the best example for anyone who's a Catholic in terms of the collision and difference between the skeptical mindset and their faith-based mindset.
Yeah.
Because Thomas, when Jesus apparently rose from the dead and showed up to all the other disciples, and they were all like, "Oh wow, man, you're back and fantastic and great," and Thomas turns around and says, "Show me your wounds." Mm-hmm. So he wasn't prepared to accept just on face value that this actually was Jesus. And if you can imagine, the inference being is that, well, you could be someone who looked like him.
Yeah.
You could be Jesus's twin brother, or someone who dressed up to look like
the first Christian scientist, probably.
Exactly. The first experimental Christian scientist.
First experimental, I like it. Yes.
Hypothesis 0. You are not Jesus.
Yeah. You certainly didn't rise from the dead.
Absolutely. Oh, you can't take a Malteser. Okay, maybe you are Jesus. Yeah. And I think that's it. And I certainly was taught, and I'm sure you were too, I was taught that doubting Thomas was nearly he was only above Judas.
Yeah, just barely.
He was just barely above Judas.
This is why it's pointed out in the Bible and mentioned every single Easter.
Blessed is he who does not see and yet still believes.
Yeah.
And I just remember, and it was only years later that I was able to put words on my discomfort. I just knew, like, that's just completely contrary to everything else we are taught in life. Look before you cross the road. Don't jump over a wall unless you've been chased by a dog if you don't know what's on the other side of it.
Absolutely.
Don't get into a car if someone says, "I've got some sweets. Would you like to get into my car?" I mean,
we don't do that, people. It's not what we do. And in fact, I remember reading somewhere somebody said, goodness, that's very precise, that we're all natural born scientists.
Yeah.
That is to say, we're all curious, and we ask as kids.
Exactly.
We ask questions why all the time. We want to understand. And at some point we do indeed lose that curiosity, and some of it may be just shortcutting, and no doubt even there's ideas about where belief comes from, and certainly there seems to be an evolutionary advantage to shortcutting, and again, that's a whole other podcast in itself. But it also seems to be massively cultural.
Yeah.
And as you said, we even in our current culture today, we don't, or when we were growing up as well, it was contrary to everything else.
Exactly.
And I no doubt that was probably the first thing in my head when I was a kid, probably going, that just... I think I remember feeling something for doubting Thomas. I think I remember
I remember feeling sympathy for both Thomas and for Judas.
Because
there's the line about Judas being like, better he had not been born. I was like, but he's kind of fundamental to the plot. It's
shouldn't he be rewarded?
Exactly.
Otherwise, there wouldn't have been the zombie Jesus to break it.
Exactly.
So
without him, it wouldn't have been the Last Supper. It would have been just
another supper. Yeah, it just wouldn't have, in any way. It just wouldn't have been marketable. Wouldn't be. I mean, someone has to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
But
we have to have our blood sacrifice.
So that's I mean, so this is it. So this is our. I mean, obviously we can't, as you said earlier on, we can't test everything, and that's fine. But we can trust in sources that seem to get it right, again and again and again.
Yes.
And as I said, we can check with multiple sources. And if they're all saying it, then it's increasing the probability it's right. Does not guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something important, and no doubt another podcast we'll have to do at some point. There is a misunderstanding of science, and I think you and I were talking about this earlier about how we both have gone through education, and I have a little scientific education, not much, and I'm about to go into it big time now. Yeah. And at no time was the scientific method or the values of science. There is a values in science, but they're axiomatic, and again, another podcast.
And I'm going to need you to explain what axiomatic
is. Right, yes. Well,
but again, we can do that podcast.
We could do it in that podcast. We want to, a friend of mine calls me an axiomatic fundamentalist, and it's absolutely true, and it's hilarious if you're a mathematician, and if you're not.
We may do a special glossary and dictionary
for each term, so we'll definitely, we'll be better. But there are values in science, but they're well-picked values. Yeah. They're not randomly picked. But the scientific method is crucial. Not only obviously it's crucial to science, but it's crucial to the way scientists think about problems. And it is those values and that method that freethinkers are attempting to apply broadly to all experiences of life, or as many of them as they can, with the hope of trying to avoid self-deceit and confirmation bias, which every human being huge. And the best scientist has. The best scientist
confirmation bias, by the way, is why it feels good to feel right and why it feels bad to feel wrong. And that's basically what it is. And we're very programmed to do this. Mm-hmm. It's why, it's just basically
it's the backfire reaction. If someone says we're wrong, we immediately put up the shields. Yeah. And I do it myself. I still do it. I'm trying.
You have to do it. I mean, this is the whole thing. It's like you could not go through life without confirmation bias being hardwired into you. Absolutely. In the same way that you're pre-programmed to want to bond more with your own family.
Yes, over somebody else.
There's very deep animal reasons. It's animal reasons.
Yeah.
It's it goes
these are innate. They've evolved, and they're fundamentally part of it.
It's shortcuts. Yeah. It's shortcuts that enable us to make our way through life. There's actually something, and I wonder this, right? Because before I got into kind of like learning more about the scientific method and stuff, I would have had the opinion of science, which was actually, here's what I had. What I had is, I think in my head, I had science was broken down into two disciplines. You had engineering and you had science, right? And science did stuff like, and like, this is something I held up until my 30s. Like, this is shameful that this is how I felt. So science was like CERN and the Large Hadron Collider and particle physics, and it had nothing to do with reality. Like, it had nothing to do with that. It was literally scientists becoming ever more specialized, ever more niche, ever more obscure, and just trying to prove each other right. And it was kind of like a circle jerk for like nerds, right? That's literally the image I had in my head.
It's a disturbing and yet probably very accurate image in some
yes, right. Yeah. Then you had engineers, and they built stuff, so they were good. Yeah. So I would have said in my hierarchy, engineering better than science, right?
Yeah.
And then you had like biologists, and I didn't consider biologists scientists, because biologists did stuff with animals.
Yeah, icky squishy things.
Exactly, and so so that was good. So that was applicable, and that did stuff. And chemistry, well, they made drugs, so that was good as well. But scientists, like particle physics and astrophysics, they were just nutters, really, and they were just like autistic people who no one ever talked to, and they were just stuck in the background. And we give them loads of computers, and sure, doesn't it keep them out of harm's way?
Keeps them out of all of our way. Yeah.
So for anybody listening who has that same opinion, I totally get it, right? I mean, because that was what I had. It took me years to figure out that what I had a wrong version of it.
Right.
And hopefully maybe over the next kind of couple of episodes we're gonna this will just come out in just discussion and stuff like this. And I've moved to a position now where I think pretty much not the opposite, because I still think engineers are cool, but like particle physicists and astrophysicists, like these are the people who will change human civilization, because the stuff that they're investigating is so important and it's so fundamental.
I mean, I'm with you to a point. Believe it or not, and this is one of many emissions. Obviously, this emission is far more difficult than the emission that I'm gay. Yeah. I'm a Star Trek fan.
Yeah,
and Star Trek taught me a lot about science.
Yeah,
and it certainly gave me an interest that I kind of had when I was a kid and a teenager, and then kind of waned, and was replaced indeed by music and oddly mathematics when I went into college. But Star Trek certainly gave me a kind of a popular interest in science.
Yeah.
And it remained popular until very recently, where I've now decided to completely change my career and go into science full time.
Gene Roddenberry would be proud.
I think he would. I think he would. And that's a wonderful thing, I think. But so I definitely knew it was a bit more.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been a million miles away from your position. I would still have thought, I would never have thought physics was...
Yeah.
Didn't we solve all of that?
Yeah.
Sir Newton solved most of us, didn't he? And then Albert had added a little bit at the end.
Yeah.
So I never thought of it being fundamental, and I couldn't agree with you any more that we are all connected, and that story of how we are all connected is amazing and fantastic, and way better than anything that Bronze Age goat-herders could have come up with, and we know it because of astrophysicists and cosmologists and biologists and so many other people. So you're absolutely right. The story that science is telling us is fundamental, I think, will fundamentally shift human culture and civilization.
Well, I think, I had, and again, I would have one of the, because I don't know science, it's like I'm an observer of it, and literally if they say, scientists say this, I go, great, so I'll just say that scientists say this, because I'm not going to go to college for 6 years to figure out whether that news headline
one
was correct
particular statement is true,
But the best example I heard of this is like someone complaining about the cost of CERN, the Large Hadron Collider where the Higgs boson was detected.
What is the cost, by the way?
20 billion, as far as I'm aware. Okay. So, but let's say it's 200 billion. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's say it costs 10 times what it actually cost. If it wasn't for CERN, we wouldn't have the internet.
Absolutely, something celebrated very recently, right?
How much is the internet worth? Is the entire internet worth more than 20 billion? And this is the point. This is the point about fundamental scientific research: is that what they're investigating and the tools and the ingenuity required to investigate stuff at this level, which I don't understand, right? But if you have to build something that's 50 miles across and contains more metal than the Eiffel Tower in a room that's like 10 stories high, you tend to have to deal with big problems and invent really, really cool machinery to do it, and great stuff comes out of it. Teflon, Velcro, a whole bunch of stuff, like kind of digital cameras. The CCD chip inside every camera, right? So the thing that actually allows the image to be transferred into a digital format, that came out of the space race. That came out of man landing on the moon.
So if we didn't have that, then Saturday nights and more importantly Sunday mornings wouldn't be as exciting. Yeah, you couldn't do a selfie. You couldn't put it on Facebook.
Exactly.
This is just such an amazing thing.
YouTube wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that.
There are people cursing scientists all around Ireland now. They're just cursing. Why did we give them the toys? You're absolutely right. And of course, all of that science was done without a business application in mind, or without a particular solution in mind for any particular... The problem it was trying to solve was the problems that scientists are interested in, which is everything in the universe. How does the universe work? And
the reason we want to do that is twofold. First of all, we want to understand it. We want to know how A led to B, led to C, led to D, if that is the case. But actually, I think it's more fundamental than that. And I think it's we want to control it. I actually think
with a kind of evil twirling moustache kind of control, or just humanity trying to take some sort of control over its destiny.
I know it feels good to be nice to people. You give up your seat in a bus, or you hold the door open for somebody, or you let somebody order. Like here's the thing, right? You're at the queue in the checkout, right? And you've got a massive amount of shopping, and someone comes up who, a mother comes up who's got like a baby in a trolley and like 10 items. Well, you let her go ahead, don't you? Yeah. Now, here's the point. You do that because it's a nice thing to do. But I actually like feeling how I feel. Yeah. I feel good after that. It's nice to be nice. Mm-hmm. So I think if we figure out anti-gravity, right, or teleportation or something like that, I don't think the first thing we're going to do is kill a bunch of people.
I agree.
I think we're actually going to help a bunch of people first. And I think that because I think our most basic programming is don't eat or kill the person standing next to you. And the reason we know that is an absolute fact is there's 6 billion of us, if that wasn't our most primary programming, if our first thought was, how do I get what that person has? If that was our first thought, there'd only be one of us.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be 6 billion of us. Families wouldn't
7 billion,
exist.
7 billion of
7
us now.
billion,
Yeah, 6 billion, 7 billion.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I think we're definitely we have become programmed through evolution to be obviously altruistic, and
plus, like, you know, I want to like Star Wars to be real. So,
absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. So we really have to make it there. We definitely have to make it to there. I want my lightsaber.
And I believe CERN is step one on how to build a lightsaber. It's you know,
that or the very first Death Star. I wonder if they had that you know that flaw. That
I want to see the headline: CERN discovers midichlorians.
Oh dear, or a better explanation of how the Force existed. Exactly. But anyway, yes. Well, there'll be more of that most definitely, and yes, it is a fantastic thing. And as you said, the internet. I was saying this to somebody the other day. Well, actually, the World Wide Web, I think, in CERN, and the internet in as part of DARPA. No doubt, this is one of the problems about doing a Freethought podcast for atheists and secularists and humanists and whatever. Our audience does tend to be quite well read, and that's great, and we encourage more of that for newcomers to the podcast. But they're also going to pick up on every single thing we got wrong and we get wrong. And yes, that's great. Absolutely, do tell us. Let us know. Actually, now is a good time, I suppose, to give our email address. Yes. And we'll put all of these details anyway, but and we'll eventually be on all the social media. But for now, we're starting with good old-fashioned email. So if you want to comment on anything that we talk about, if there's anything you want us to talk about,
point out where we're wrong,
and most importantly, point out where we're wrong, and there have been many instances, no doubt, tonight, then you can get us at our website, at our email address, which is freethinkers@freethoughtfriday.com. So we'll put, of course, that link as well in the description box for the YouTube podcast. So, but yeah, no doubt we'll get these things wrong, but please do educate us and help us get it right.
And we don't mind being wrong.
No. There's yes. So that's actually a very important thing, and something that Trinity's Science Gallery recently had an exhibition. I think it only in the last few weeks finished up. The exhibition was called Fail Better, and I was so delighted to see that this is here. And I have to put my hand on my heart. Up until even less than a year ago, up until 11 months ago, I would say, I had such a bad problem with admitting failure that in fact it landed me in hospital. It was
so had you escalated the language you used for like just being wrong, and you would kind of go, well, it's not that I'm wrong, I'm a failure. So you kind of went being wrong equals being a failure.
Well, I wouldn't have done it quite so consciously and quite so clearly, but certainly psychologically and indeed emotionally.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
I can't be wrong.
This is a huge problem. I can't be wrong. This is a huge problem.
And as I said, it to the point that it actually caused a physiological reaction that landed me in hospital. It became that bad, and I didn't know that's what it was at the time, and I have spent these last 11 months learning about that and learning about the power of science and indeed psychology, which I used to think was just quackery, but
there may be something to it.
I just think there may be, and addressing that fundamental issue with myself, and I understand it's a cultural issue. It may be just more impacted on me for whatever reason and less on others. But this fear of failure that our culture it permeates our culture, and then
everywhere
the culture reinforces that it should be permeated with it, is something that we definitely need to change. And I am going to get things wrong. I have gotten things wrong. I will try my best to tone my ego down when I get corrected, but I'm also going to get that wrong, and my shields will go up. But
it always stings in the moment.
Oh, it does.
It stings like a kick in the balls.
Absolutely,
like, I mean, it really is. Yeah,
absolutely. But I've been saying to people, and I repeat it to people often, but I'm actually repeating it to myself. I would rather know the truth. Than pretend that I'm right.
Absolutely.
Or I'd rather know the truth than think I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So I want to know the truth. From my ego's point of view, I don't. But my ego is so big it can fill another multiverse. So it could do with a little bit of deflating. But for now, I'm going to get it wrong, and I want people to tell me. But I don't want people just to tell me that you're wrong, Ciarán,
Yes,
you're wrong.
you need
I want
to
to tell
back that up,
why
mate.
I'm wrong. Yeah, I should be very, very careful. I don't want people just to go, well, you're wrong about everything. I'm sure I probably am wrong about some things.
Christians out there, we're not going to accept, well, you're wrong because you're gay, mate, because that's not an argument, okay? So you can forget that one straight away.
No, definitely not. But
well, I think, because we talked about this before we did it, and let's have this chat, because I think this is really important. I would have said, and again, before kind of coming to free thinking and stuff, and this is something that you see all the time, and you'll see it in the news at least once a month. Some politician somewhere, and generally it's the leader of the country, right? So in our case it'd be Enda, or it might be David Cameron over in the UK, or Barack Obama over in the US, or something like this, and it's, kind of and they always use the thing flip-flop or U-turn.
Yes.
President, politician, kind of Taoiseach does U-turn on whatever, right? Now, here's the point. At any given time, you have facts and information in front of you, and you're faced with some choices. So what happens is you look at the facts and you do a think and stuff like this, and you decide, well, I'm gonna choose to make a decision, to make decision A, because the facts lead me to believe that this is the right reason. Now, what you've got to be aware of is like, well, how are you weighing up the facts? And sometimes you'll kind of disagree with something that somebody says. For instance, the HSE over in Ireland, people say they're a terrible, terrible, terrible health organisation, and I go, yes, but you're assuming that health is actually what they're trying to do, as opposed to just employ a shitload of people, in which case they're very, very successful at employing people. They're just no good at healing people. So it depends on how you define success. So somebody makes a decision at a certain point based on whatever evidence and facts they have before them, and later on they then change their mind. Now, we're all allowed to do that in our private lives. Changing our minds is considered a good thing. I reserve the right to change my mind. And in fact, it's one of the stereotypes that would be said about, you'll always see it as like, kind of the unpopular or difficult girlfriend character in a badly written sitcom is like, oh, well, I reserve the right to change my mind. Right? And it's always put across as negative. Changing your mind is never, ever characterized as positive. But here's the other way of looking at it. And I'm going to use a personal example. I used to work for a company, and I worked for them for 7 years. And what happened was that I decided I wanted to get out of there. I felt I'd done my time. And I went and I met another company. We got on exceptionally well. And I decided to move to that other company. And 4 weeks later, I moved back to my original company. And when I discussed this with people, they went, oh, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that. And my answer, and I was surprised that I'd done it myself. What became very apparent was that the new company I had moved to, the job that I was actually doing, bore no resemblance to the job that we actually discussed I was going to be doing.
Right.
So once I got there, the new evidence was, well, this isn't the job you signed up for. So I was faced with two choices. A, stick it out. Right? Look for another job. Knowing this was going to take a minimum of 2 to 3 months to find this. Or B, contact the people I just moved from and gone, yeah, I've made a huge mistake here.
I want to come back.
Can I have my job back?
Yeah.
And they went, yes. And since that moment, and some people may still go, oh, that's bad for the CV. No, it's not. It absolutely isn't, because I could just airbrush out the company I moved to. Because it looks like it's unbroken.
I've done that anyway.
Right? But the other thing is this. In the face of new information that contradicts your previous position, if you don't change your mind, if you don't admit to being wrong, you are very, very likely to basically make a mistake. Thomas Edison, the man who invented the electric light bulb, because it took him loads and loads of time to find the right materials to kind of make it from, had a great saying which says, I know 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb. Because, supposedly he made the light bulb on his 1,001st attempt or something like this, which is a beautiful round number, and I hope it's true, but I
probably
doubt
not.
it.
No,
right?
I doubt it too.
Exactly.
But it sounds good. It sounds good.
So here's the point. If Edison having made the first unsuccessful light bulb, had gone, well, fuck this, I'm just making the same light bulb, and I'm going to keep on making this light bulb until it goddamn well works. Right? And that's the point, right? That's the point. Yeah. You can't be scared to be wrong. You cannot be scared to be wrong, because by being wrong, you inevitably lead to being right. Yeah. Because there's only one right for any specific thing. Right, and I'm not talking relativity. I'm not, and by that I don't mean Einstein. I mean, everyone's opinion is equally valid. No, it bloody well isn't. A homeopath's opinion carries no weight whatsoever. A heart surgeon's opinion carries a shitload of weight. Right. So, if you do not allow yourself to be wrong, you will only ever know the amount of stuff you know right now. And then also new stuff you've managed to take on board without ever having formed an opinion of what that stuff was going to be before you learn it. Now, you're never, like, it's a bad way of living your life. Like, it's an appalling.
And indeed, you could, as an actual human being, as an evolved participant on this planet, you would not have succeeded unless you had the ability to correct yourself and learn from past mistakes. So it is innate within us to change. Unfortunately, it is also psychologically innate with us to resist that change. Our egos do tend to trump our even when logic is staring us in the face.
We say ego, and ego has come to mean a bad thing now. Ego has come to mean a sense of I am more important than you. That's what ego, I think when people say my ego or an egomaniac, that's what they tend to mean. But here, let's use an example, right? It's like you're in a relationship, I'm in a relationship, right? So I've been with my wife we've been married for 11 years, we've been together for 22 years. There is nothing quite like that awful sinking feeling you get halfway through an argument where you are convinced that not only are you factually correct, but you are morally correct, you are romantically correct. In fact, you need to invent new words that you can also be correct about. And my wife, Fiona, will say one thing, and what it does is it basically just might give a bit more extra context to what she said, to maybe what I reckon. And all of a sudden I go, shite, I'm completely wrong about that, aren't I? I got that. Damn. And that moment there, now I have a choice at that moment. I can either dig my heels in, now knowing that I'm wrong, because you can feel it.
That's not going to get you any, you know that.
Yeah.
If you do that, that's just the wrong. Already it's the wrong. Forget about logic.
Absolutely,
the wrong choice for many reasons. That one being most important. But anyway,
sheer instinct will go. Give in now.
Yeah, give it right now.
You might be screaming, "Oh yes," later on. It's like, you know, that's absolutely.
I love being wrong.
I love being wrong. As long as I got tissues nearby.
Yeah. So sorry, you were saying in that moment you have a choice. You can dig in your heels, or you can,
or you can. Now here's the point, right? It's like, you know, kind of knowing, you know, like what I'll do is I'll tend to dig my heels in for a little bit longer, and then I'll try and engineer it so is that I kind of end up backing out of my pig-headedness kind of stuff. But I think
far too familiar.
I think everybody does that.
Yes,
I think everybody does that, and I think that's what we've got to do.
And it's a very difficult thing to do. It is absolutely very difficult. But it's and if you want to see this in all its splendid glory and guts. I was at a conference there, my first, I suppose, of what will be many as I move into this new career, and I was seeing people who are unbelievably smart, who had done an awful lot of work on their particular projects that they were presenting at this conference in the form of a paper or a presentation. And no doubt, I mean, certainly to me they sounded like I was going to this conference to find out what I don't know, because I'm not near the level of where I need to be at a conference. So I wanted to see what it was like, and it was good to go there. But I don't know anything when I put myself against these people who were talking. And so they certainly sound like they do know what they're talking about, but they were being challenged left, right and centre by their friends, by people they don't know. I wouldn't say by enemies, but certainly by people who definitely would want to have tried to prove them wrong. But there was no feeling of animosity. There was certainly there was a politeness and a political correctness version of me going, "Oh, you really shouldn't be asking that. Really, do you have to question that particular piece of data? I'm sure it looks fine." But of course, they don't do that in science. No. This is not done in science. But there was no feeling of animosity. Neither the speaker nor the questioner were. They all understood that this is part of what Carl Sagan calls this global meta mind. It's part of a multi-generational approach to try and get it right.
Because it's not about being right; it's about finding
absolutely,
right.
absolutely. So it was wonderful to see that in science. And then I went back to my day job. I work in a bank. I'm not going to say which, but I work in a bank, and I don't think the bank is any worse or better than any other company in this regard. But people were saying we're going to do it this way, and no one was questioning it, because maybe the person who was saying it is the person they're trying to oppress, because they might get that promotion, or that person might put in a good word for them, or whatever. And so it's just a completely different sense, completely different vibe. It's not about solving the problem.
No.
It's about many different things, but it's certainly not about solving the problem, and it's not about getting the optimal solution. And that can be, especially for problem solvers who are working in this environment, I find that very troubling. I find I've now become even more attuned to that happening.
I think once
and I find it very difficult to. It's why I want to leave, because I'm finding it very difficult to keep my mouth shut. Yeah. And of course I need to until I do leave. But I would imagine I'd probably get fired, and not only from this job, but possibly every single job after it, because I'm now kind of going, but that's not what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
And I think if you want to see if you wanted to see this in operation, I would challenge anybody who is a believer, a religious believer, that the next time you're in mass and at the end of the gospel, just shout out the words "prove it." And just see if they can provide any proof or evidence that what they've said is factually correct. And here's the level of proof I think you should expect, right? If somebody is asking you to live your life by a set of rules, I think they need to present evidence that would be admissible in court, which means hearsay is out, which means the Bible can't be taken because
all, yes.
No one in the Bible ever met Jesus.
Yes. Minor point.
Exactly. Minor point. No one
no one who wrote it.
No one who wrote any of the books in the Bible
and after
met
that,
Jesus.
We don't even know. Yeah, I mean,
so that's complete. So the Bible is now inadmissible as evidence, and anyone who has taken the Bible to be part of their evidence, well, that's also inadmissible because you're basing it on hearsay. So I would challenge any believer. And I would welcome people to come back to us and kind of contact us and say, well, actually, I did, and this is what the priest are. And not just Catholics, like kind of any belief.
Absolutely.
Just ask when the person who is giving you the religious instruction, when they've finished, ask them, prove it. Give me one piece of proof that would stand up in a court of law, and the court of law being like, if you're going to trust your liberty to a court, right. I think that's the standard of proof we should expect
Absolutely.
from anyone who wants us, because the laws of the land, they tell us how to live our lives.
Yeah.
So I think anybody that expects us to do the same, they need to be able to provide the same level of proof that would be provided in court.
And there's a fantastic podcast, I'm going to plug it now. It's called The Thinking Atheist at thethinkingatheist.com. Done by an excellent American former Christian. He's from Oklahoma. His name is Seth Andrews. And he mentions it quite often in his podcast. He's saying, with eternal life or eternal death in the balance, these ideas should be clear, and the proof should be undeniable.
Yes.
And if indeed the creator of the universe created us and wants us to go for eternal life, and not I agree with Hitchens, eternal life actually doesn't sound as appealing as I think when you start thinking about it for 5 minutes. You kind of go, oh, that's not particularly good. But anyway,
as Han Solo says, I don't know, I can imagine quite a bit.
So maybe I and Hitchens are wrong. But I doubt it.
So do I.
I know. But with eternal life in the balance, as Seth Andrews said, you'd expect that it should be absolutely fundamentally clear. And so as he puts out the challenge to his listeners, I think we should do the same. If we are wrong, then I want to know we're wrong. If we should be following this or any other religion or the one true religion, I want to know. I absolutely do want to know, because as I said, I would rather know the truth than continue to pretend that I'm right. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So please do contact us, Freethinkers at freethoughtfriday.com. We probably should get to our last topic, because we're going. So I think our last topic is Santa Claus.
Our last topic is Santa Claus. Yes, exactly.
So this is an interesting one. This is one that you and I just mentioned prior to us doing our first to doing this episode, and so. I guess the question here, or the question that revolves around freethinkers and atheist community and secular community in general is Santa Claus a good idea? So not too many people go into the Easter Bunny one. It's just not really something that's celebrated, and we all kind of know that Halloween, there aren't really ghouls and goblins. It's just fun to dress up. I tend to call them every Sunday, but anyway, that's the George.
And I have an opinion, and this is so just to give people back.
Yeah.
We discussed this. We had half the discussion. We're going to recreate the first half of the discussion, and then I'm dying to hear the second half of the discussion, right?
Excellent.
Because what happened is that, like, I have an opinion about Santa Claus, and Ciarán has told me that he's got a better idea, and we're going to see if I can be wrong live in real time, and I'll be happy to be on, right? So this is why I think personally that Santa Claus is wrong. Is this right? Santa Claus, to me, it trains children to believe in the supernatural. It is the only physical evidence we have for supernatural stuff happens, because you tell a kid, if you're good, you're going to get a present, and mom and dad don't bring this present, Santa Claus brings this present, this ghost-like dude who lives up in the North Pole and can fly around the world, and all that stuff never bothered me as a child. I wasn't concerned with the physics of how he could visit all the houses and stuff like
Absolutely.
this. Right?
I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. We'll go on. Yeah.
But what I do see is that Santa Claus trains children to take things on faith and to not question, because a big part of the Santa Claus thing is make sure you're asleep so you don't see Santa Claus, i.e. you don't see mom and dad coming in and putting, and in our family the presents were put at the end of your bed. Yeah. So there was a real issue that if we were awake, we'd see mom and dad putting the stuff at the end of our bed.
Definitely couldn't do that, yeah.
So they would literally kill Santa Claus.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose, sorry to interrupt you, this is the worst ever spoiler alert, but if you're a kid and you do believe in Santa Claus, you probably should have turned off a little while ago.
Do you know, we're going to go back and we'll put in a spoiler. Actually, we will, when we edit this, we'll put in a spoiler.
Will we?
Yeah,
Should
we will.
Okay.
Yeah, we will.
Okay, we will. Right? No, we will. Okay, definitely.
Because I think that's a parent's choice. Is
completely agree.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. So we'll definitely do that. Sorry. So
I
presents
think
at the end of the bed.
Yeah, I think Santa Claus is like the free sample that the drug dealer gives you. I think it basically is, because what it is it
hooks you in, then jack up the price.
It establishes a habit,
right?
And what it does is it reinforces a dangerous way of thinking, faith-based thinking. Don't question, just accept it, and it reinforces it with toys. So it is your
drug of choice as a 4, 5, 6 year old. Yeah.
So positively reinforcing it. So whereas I'm very in favour of Christmas, because I think we should take time out from our busy lives to spend time with our loved ones, right? Santa Claus to me is bad. It teaches children not to question. It teaches children to just accept things, and to accept things that are just not true. And not only are they not true, they can't be true. They just can't be true. Yeah. So that's where I'm coming from. So I'd be quite a hardliner now. And I don't have kids, which is probably just as well, because they'd be miserable bastards who never saw Santa Claus. Right?
They get no presents for you.
No, see, they still get presents. Just mom and dad will be buying the presents.
Yeah.
You know, but what you might have a surprise present. But it's still mom and dad's surprise present.
Not magical.
Absolutely, not magic presents. So that's where I stand. So you telling me you've got a way of turning my mind.
Well,
let's see what you got.
I don't know if I can completely turn your mind, and there's always the problem of children sitting on some strange man's lap in a shopping mall. It's never a good idea. So it really is. It's almost a slam dunk case there, really, to be honest. I'm going to preface this with, this is not my idea. So I could back out of it if I don't convince you. This is an idea from another freethinker and atheist called Dale McGowan, I think he's an academic from America, and he's written a book about raising free-thinking children, free-thinking children as opposed to atheist children or humanist children or whatever else. So he has a very interesting idea on Santa Claus, and I like the idea, because I certainly would hold many of the views that you do. And the inner child of me wants to go, but please, can we not make it real? Is there some way we can make it work? So I have a confirmation bias either way. So I'm not sure yet where I feel a fall on this. But I liked Dale McGowan's approach. And if it's something that could be replicated, then I would definitely be on his side. If it's if we can repeat, if it's an experiment that we can repeat, that we could all do, then great. It may be unfortunately peculiar to his parenting style. He explained his thought on it is that Santa Claus is an excellent training tool, an excellent thinking training tool for children. And so his story is in relation to his youngest boy. And so he when he's describing this, he's explaining how his youngest boy figured out about Santa Claus.
Okay.
And Dale's hypothesis was that he had a couple of his hypothesis was his son would not ask him about whether or not Santa Claus was real until he was ready to know that he wasn't. Until he was ready to face up to the possibility that Santa wasn't real, he would never directly ask this question. This is what he thought. This is what Dale gambled.
Right, so let me make sure I understand.
Sure.
So his idea was...
So he wanted his son to be able to ask any questions, because he lets his son ask any questions about anything. Okay. And his general response is, rather than giving an answer, try to ask a leading question from his son to get his son to be thinking about it. Okay. So this could be about Jesus, because his grandmother is big into the church, or it could be about the sun or grass or animals or people or families or those two men kissing over there or whatever. So from the time his son was very young all the way like 2, 3, 4 when he started talking and then going into school, his idea was, I let my son ask any questions. I'll obviously give him answers that he could understand when I'm giving answers, but he would try to get his son to think about it by asking more questions. Okay. And then if his son wants an answer, he would preface by saying, some people think this, some people think that, and some other people may think something over else. What do you think?
Didn't Captain Picard do that in one of the Star Trek episodes about life after death or something like this? Someone asked him a question about, and he goes, well, some people believe this and some people believe that, and he goes, yeah, but what do you believe?
And it's exactly that. That was like,
I've always really liked that.
That's very good. I
feel me being wrong coming on. I feel I might be about to be wrong.
So let me. I'll try and recall some of the details, and I'll tell you what I'll do if I can actually find where I heard. I think it was a podcast, and it might have indeed. It was either a podcast with Dale and Seth. On the Thinking Atheist, or it might have been with Dale on the Humanist Hour, but it's a great story, and I think he may even have a YouTube video of it, so you can look for that. So basically, what he said is his son would ask questions like, "So how do the reindeer fly?" So when his son was about 4 or 5, he's like, "How does the reindeer fly?" So Dale would answer, "Well, some people think it's magic food that the reindeer eat. Some people think it's magic fairy dust from whatever. Some people think the reindeer actually can't fly and they just pull Santa's sleigh. What do you think?" And so he said his son would come back with something like, I think it's the magic food. So then he would go to
which is quite charming. Really,
it's very charming.
It's quite charming.
But the important thing is his son was ready to stop there. Dale was ready to. Dale decided if his son asked him outright, "Is Santa real?" He would go, "Well, some people think yes, some people don't. I don't." He was ready, willing to say that. He didn't want to lie to his son, but his feeling was his son wouldn't ask a question that he didn't want the answer to, or he wasn't ready for a possibility. So his son didn't. He stopped at that point, and so that was fine. So then a year later, he said his son asked about who makes all the toys, or how does Santa get all the toys?
Right.
And so again, Dale offered, well, some say Santa has elves, some say Santa actually goes to the shops and gets them for people and whatever else. And he said, what do you think? And his son actually went with the shops one, I think, in that case, rather than the elves one. I can't recall. I may have the details wrong. But he was happy enough to pick one of the possible answers. And then there was, I think the year after was, well, how does he get to every house in 24 hours? And he explained it. And his son, he said, or he explained what other people might have said. And he said he noticed his son beginning to kind of twinge at the explanation and pushed a bit more. And so he said, well, maybe you could do this if you did that or whatever. So, but again, it was left. Then I think by the time he was 7 or 8, I may be wrong with the details, but eventually he got to a point where he outright just asked his dad. I think actually it might have been closer to 9. He said, "Is Santa real?" And Dale goes, "Right. Well, some people think so, but I don't." And he was waiting for his son to bawl into tears. And he said his son's response was amazing. He said, "Oh, thank goodness." And Dale said, "My goodness," he looked relieved. And he said, why did you say that, son? Why is this a good thing?" And he said, "Now the world makes sense again. Because everything else that he had learned in the world
Yes.
was logical and rational
Yeah.
and made sense and had an explanation, and he was able to follow it. But the one thing that kept getting inconsistent again and again
Yeah.
was the Santa thing. And Dale responded with, well done. You figured it out.
Yeah.
And you figured it out yourself. And Dale's idea behind this is he has now learned, 1, adults can lie.
Yeah.
And 2, I now know how to figure out whether or not what somebody says is true. I ask them questions.
Very good.
So he reckons that this is from a very obviously young age, but in a very simplified form. It's the first beginnings of critical thinking.
Yeah.
And it's consistent with everything else. And his son was at a point where he was ready to know the truth, because he would rather have known the truth to make sense with the rest of his consistent sense with the rest of his worldview, rather than pretend it was right in order just to get the present. So whether that would work on every child or whether that would work on every parent is an interesting question.
I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Okay, so first things first. Yeah, I was wrong. That's a better way. That's actually a better way.
I do like it. I do like it.
Far better
I mean,
way.
Dale also mentions with absolutely no apologies that he was delighted to be able to enjoy the Santa Claus moments with his child as a young kid, but without it being intellectually dishonest or without lying to the child. And he certainly didn't use it. He says he didn't use it.
Yeah.
I trust that he's true, but he didn't. He said he didn't use it as a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
So rather than saying you must be good or Santa won't come, he used whatever usual techniques they use throughout the year to try and get the child to do the positive social behavior rather than the aberrant one. But so I that seems to be the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
I don't know. And you were saying you wonder if it is replicable.
Well, I would think that is. I mean, so first things, I think that's in if I was a hypothetical father, I think I would actually adopt that versus my previous one. So, so I'm happy to be wrong there. Okay. And I think that's actually a better way. And I think seeing that as a teaching tool, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I think. Then actually the second question is would other because what this demonstrates is it's down to the parent.
Most definitely.
It is actually down to the parent. And what it is you can take this stuff that is put in front of you by society and by other people, and you can actually take it on face value, or you can use it to actually help your child make sense of the world.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the difference. So I would say I am not in favor of a parent telling a child Santa Claus is real, Santa Claus is real, Santa Claus is real, as I was told up until a certain point.
No doubt
and then what happened is you just I don't remember ever going to my mum and dad and going Santa Claus isn't real or Santa Claus isn't. It was just you just stopped getting Santa Claus presents, right? And obviously what happened
mum and dad presents.
And presuming what happened is during the year I've kind of gone, well, Santa Claus doesn't exist, does he? And they'd have gone, no, thank Jesus we can save some money on presents for you,
We'll just get the one this year.
Exactly. So I would be not in favour of that.
Yeah.
But actually, I hadn't even considered his one, so that is a far superior.
I think it is
better,
brilliant.
man.
Yeah, I mean, because I definitely was leaning towards what you had said at the top.
Santa Claus, the crack dealer, is basically like how I have him in my head.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. It's just not a great way of doing it.
What a great
And I'll tell you what, I would warmly recommend. I also don't have kids, but if I were a hypothetical father, I would dive on this book. I haven't bought it myself. I would be curious actually just to read it, just maybe to help me interact with other people's kids and to encourage free thinking in them without overstepping my bounds. But I think
that's a tricky bit.
Yeah, that's very well. Yeah, that's more than
because I remember having a conversation.
That's so many. A full series of that.
And this is the thing, and I don't have an answer to this now, and maybe if people want to get in touch with us and stuff and give us their answers,
their experiences. I
remember talking to someone who I worked with and expressing my feelings about Santa Claus and stuff, and she's a mother, and she's a mother of two, and she's a phenomenal mother. Like she's one of the people that should be put on posters advertising parenthood. She looks on her kids the way gamers look on their Xbox. She can't wait to get home in the weekend and just spend all the time that she has. She was always miserable first thing on a Monday because obviously she missed her kids. It was wonderful mother and stuff. And I remember saying this to her, and she loved Santa Claus because of the the magic.
Yes.
Now, you see, we call magic supernaturalism, and that's
Yeah,
bad. Whereas magic is kind of cool. So she looked in it as it added this extra little bit of fizz to a kid's life. And you can't take that away, and you can't deny that it has a thing. What I like about your example is the fact that the kid gets to hold on to the fizz for as long as it's relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, it also is a very useful way of helping them navigate the world when they're older. I think it is a great example. It's why I remember it. I only listened to it once, but it stuck in my head because it was a wonderful way of thinking about it. But I'm the same. As I said to you earlier on, I love tradition. I love Christmas. It is my favourite time of the year, and I love building on traditions, and I love the family traditions we have, and now I have my own little traditions, which is my friends and with my husband. And I'm, as I said earlier on, I'm a big fan of not only having traditions and celebrating traditions, but also augmenting them and passing on an evolved version, a mutated version to the next generation. So I think it's great. And certainly Santa Claus, I really, again, from a confirmation bias point of view, as much as anything else, would like to think that there is a place in the free thought mind for Santa Claus if it's something that could be turned into something positive. And certainly Dale McGowan's way of approaching it seems to be that. But I'll reserve judgment as it absolutely for everyone. Maybe if other people maybe if anyone else out there has actually dealt with this, they actually do have kids, and maybe they can tell us how they deal with it, if they deal with it at all. Are they just happy to do it in the more traditional way? Santa exists and just deal with the consequences later, or do they do a variant of what Dale McGowan does, or do they just not do Santa Claus at all?
I wonder, in the same way, do kids think do kids equate Ronald McDonald and Santa Claus? Do they actually think they're the same thing? And not the same person, but do they give them the same level of credibility? So the Michelin Man, Ronald McDonald, Santa Claus. Sure, you don't take this too seriously. And maybe this is one of those times when adults overthink it.
And the children
when kids are just they're never even dawned on us, man. Do you know what I mean? It's
it's just the way the universe works. It could be that. It could be that. No, I was going to go into the whole thing with their Santa Claus and clowns, and I'm just not going to, because clowns freak the hell out of me. But
we did come up. We have to finish up as we're talking Santa Claus, right? We were watching. There's the piece of music that we're going to have at the end, and there's some great Freethinkers, and everybody has their name up there on it, and anybody out there who this is their first time coming across this, just look up each of these people, and it doesn't matter who they are, they're all phenomenal. But there is James Randi.
Absolutely.
And James Randi is a very jovial, he would be the Moses of the Abraham of Freethinkers, right?
Absolutely.
An avuncular looking old man and stuff, this big shiny eyes, big happy smiley shiny eyes and stuff, and a big beard. So I think maybe for Freethinkers we might be able to replace Santa Claus with Randy Claus.
I love Randy Claus.
And if you just get a big picture of, and if you're good,
we should explain
James Randi.
James Randi, yes. James Randi, Randi, Randy Claus, not another variant of Randy. But absolutely. He's I didn't know much about him until I think he's is he the co-founder of JREF, yes.
The James Randi Educational Foundation.
That's right.
He has
and TAM, is he big on
he
TAM?
set up TAM and stuff as well.
The amazing meeting, which is a free thought meeting, I think, every
Here's a quick thing for anybody who thinks that astrology or tarot cards or divining or Uri Geller or any of these type of people, that actually there's something there, that there might be something beyond kind of science. James Randi has for 30 years now had a thing called the James Randi Prize, and it's £1 million. And you can find out, it's sitting in escrow in a bank, I believe in Las Vegas, and it is absolutely there, and you can acquire it, and he will offer $1 million to anybody who can prove anything supernatural. Anything supernatural. No one has won it. No, and he's open up to mediums, people who suppose he can talk to the dead. You can't, because they're dead, and no one has ever been able to do it. People who can bend spoons. Nope, you can't do that either. Right? And he has done this. Now here's the point. Surely, if any of these people had any of the gifts they supposedly say they have, one of them would have claimed this. But as I saw a great thing on Facebook, the reason why faith healers aren't in hospitals Helping sick people is the same reason why fortune tellers don't win the lottery.
That's right. Yes, and that
because it's all bollocks.
Doesn't work. And there's actually so we'll that video that we were talking about.
Yeah.
I'll come to that in a second, just because we want to make sure we announce it, and it'll be part of the video version of this podcast on YouTube, and we'll of course keep the audio in, and hopefully it'll also end up being our intro theme, because we think it's a really, really great song. It's
beautiful.
But before we go to that song, there's another one which also it's a tone poem. It's not a tone poem. It's a jazz, almost beatnik poem by the amazingly talented Tim Minchin. It's called Storm. Do you know it?
I don't.
You don't? Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. It's 9 minutes 30 seconds long. It's a poem, but it's a poem set to music. It's done in that kind of beatnik style, and of course in Tim Minchin's amazing characterizations. And it's all about a guest, a girl called Storm, who's and they're all at a dinner party. Tim Minchin and his wife and a friend, and then this girl Storm, and Storm is big into meridian lines and star signs, and Tim Minchin's character in this poem eventually has to respond, and it's absolutely brilliant.
I think
there are great lines, so definitely Google it, Storm. But this song that we were talking about is called A Wave of Reason. It's by a YouTuber called MelodySheep. He's done several of these where he takes either speeches or videotape or indeed other podcasts of people just talking, and he puts it through I actually have discussed this with him about how he creates this, but he puts it through samplers and has them, and uses basically the auto tune to actually have them sing what they're saying, and he puts it against some great little loops that he's created himself, and they're fantastic. It's really great. And this particular, so he's got a whole series of these called the Symphony of Science. I warmly recommend you can see them and listen to them for free on YouTube. I went and bought it, but they're really, really good. And this particular one, A Wave of Reason, I really love. It has Dawkins in it. It has James Randi in it. It has Sam Harris, Michael Shermer, Carolyn
Polka.
Yeah. And
so I'd never come across, and thanks, and this is it, like it's the one-stop shop.
It is, because all the names in the video he puts up, and as Robert was saying, absolutely every single one of them I've read, or I've either watched interviews with them, or I've read some of their books or some of their articles, and every single one of them has something fantastic and really profound, I think, to say. So definitely go watch MelodySheep's A Wave of Reason and look up all of the guys in the video. You won't be disappointed. Cool.
And I'm going to one other thing. If you don't have the time to do all of that, right, but you just want to look at the video, fine. And then you go, I want to look up one thing. I'm going to suggest one thing that they should look up, and maybe you suggest one thing.
All right.
I would suggest that one of the best things to give you perspective is by Carl Sagan, and it's a little piece called Pale Blue Dot.
Do you know what? I'm very familiar with this, but I actually haven't watched it, so I'm going to watch that.
I hope I haven't seen the one that you are going to recommend, and then I'll go watch that.
Right. Okay. Well, now
this sounds like a kids' TV program.
It really does. Jesus. What are you going to recommend? That's a very good question. I think. I loved Dawkins' documentary on The Root of Evil, which I only saw very late. I certainly didn't watch it in 2004. I only watched it, I think, last year or maybe in 2012. So that is featured quite a bit in this particular video. But if not that, Carl Sagan again, I'm going to mention, and in this case, Cosmos. In fact, I'll use that as a way of moving towards actually the current Cosmos series, which is the second incarnation of it. If you're not familiar with it, I think it's on National Geographic.
I think so.
I
think so.
I'm acquiring it elsewhere, but it's on National Geographic, I think, and you'll find it. It's being hosted by the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, who many people see as a kind
as
of
important
successor.
as Neil Armstrong, as American as Degrassi High, and punches with his logic like Mike.
Oh, very good. He's brilliant. He's very funny. He can be quite in your face without being overly in your face, but he's an excellent communicator of science. And this new incarnation of Cosmos is brilliant. It's actually produced by
Seth MacFarlane.
Yes, Seth MacFarlane, the Family Guy, and with I think many of the special effects are overseen by the guys who produced Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Next Gen.
Yeah, that's right. Ronald D. Moore is
Ronald D. Moore. That's right. Is one of the writers, and music is by I should know this because I'm big in film music. Alan Silvestri of Back to the Future.
Yeah,
and an excellent score. The whole thing is well done. But the original Cosmos, which was on public American TV, which is as ill-funded as you get, public access TV, and done in the very early 80s, is still actually remarkably excellent. And every single one of those episodes is online. So
actually, do you know what?
You should definitely watch some of that.
Cosmos Series 1 to Cosmos Series 2 demonstrates the not being scared to be wrong. Because actually, in the 30 years or the 30-something years since it, science has moved on. Science has learned new truths.
Absolutely.
Because it's not that they've replaced the old ones, it's that they found out something that was even more true than what they had the last time. Yeah. And it's not that, as they say themselves, it's not that the old rules didn't apply. It's that they do apply, so that now we have something that applies to more.
More, absolutely. They're more accurate. And I should possibly end my stint here with this as one of my favourite quotes from Richard Feynman. Actually, do you know what? I take everything back. If I would get you to watch anything, I'd get you to watch the BBC Horizon programme on Richard Feynman, who's also quoted in that Wave of
I haven't
Reason.
seen that.
Yes. No, I tell you what, because it's more succinct. It's about 40-50 minutes. It's free on YouTube. If you type in Horizon, Richard Feynman. It's from the 80s. It's so color-wise, it's not your HD quality, but it's excellent. It gives an amazing insight into what must have been who was an amazing man, Richard Feynman, and I learned a lot from just that 40 minutes of TV. So for bang for your buck, I definitely go into that. He talks about the current ideas, religious ideas about the cosmology just being so not in proportion. It just doesn't make sense. He also is quite critical of certain things in science as well, of the scientific community. So have a listen to that. But I was going to say, yes, one of my favourite Richard Feynman quotes, and there are many. Wow, I'm a nerd. Is his definition of science, and he defines science as ever closer approximations to the truth. Not the truth, but ever closer approximations. So as science gets it wrong and then improves and gets it right, it's getting closer. It's like that limit in maths again. I'm being very nerdy, but you're getting closer and closer and closer to the truth. And so I think that's a great way. Science is not binary. It's not black and white. There's very little of it where we're black and white about it.
And when people hear the phrase, and this is one of the issues that I've only come to realise myself, when people hear the phrase science gets it wrong, what that doesn't mean is, well, we put a wooden heart inside your body and that didn't work. So, but we did think for thousands of years that we should put wooden hearts inside of people. It doesn't mean that. What it means is, here's a theory that we think gets us close to the truth. Now, we've now found a better theory. It gets us closer even so to the truth. So we would then say, the first theory therefore was wrong. It doesn't mean that it had no merit whatsoever. No, it meant that it had an answer for a certain amount of stuff. And the new theory has more answers. And frequently, they're cumulative.
Theory 2.0.
Exactly.
It's just a better... The first one worked for some part of it. And then it's like the earth is flat, yes, because when you stand up on a hill and you look across, it does look flat. But it didn't explain the new data that was got. And so a better idea. Science doesn't hold anything as sacred except for the data.
So what's that Richard Feynman quote again?
So Richard Feynman's definition of science is ever closer approximations to the truth.
Ever closer approximations to the truth.
Yeah. Getting better and better bit by bit by bit by bit. When we get it wrong, we learn how to get it right a bit more. When we get it right, then we move a little bit more. He didn't think, as I do too, that it's probably not likely we'll ever actually get to the truth.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean we don't work towards it, and it doesn't mean that when we get it wrong, we're wrong about everything, as you said. Exactly. It just means we were right about some part of it, not about all of it. So we use the evidence and more evidence to create the better idea. It's the ideas that you should change, not the data. So if your ideas are wrong because they conflict with the data, keep the data and change your ideas.
I like it.
Cool.
Excellent.
I think we'll probably end it there.
That's it. One last thing, which is just some events coming up. We're just aware of
very
two
important
events
in the community.
The next one is, and we don't know whether this podcast will be out on time for this to be in it, but the next Atheists Ireland Atheists in the Pub event is on Tuesday the 27th of May, and it's on in the Workman's Club. Generally it starts between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's the Workman's Club in the Keys. And if anyone wants to find out more details about that, they can email us again. What's the email address?
Freethinkers@freethoughtfriday.com.
Freethinkers@freethoughtfriday.com. And then the next Atheists Ireland also has an information table in the GPO
on the 7th.
The 7th of June is the first Saturday of every single month.
And then on the 14th, again, second Saturday of every... not the 14th, the 15th, the second Sunday of every month, they usually have a brunch. In Dublin, but they have brunches actually now all around the country. Yeah. So I've been to a few of them. They're absolutely fantastic. It's a great way of meeting new people who think as you do, and it's not a bad way to spend a Sunday at all.
No, lovely.
So and it's great to see that they have progressed. They're not progressed, but they've grown. I mean, when I started going to them only a little while ago, there were some in Dublin and some in Galway. Now I'm seeing them pop up all over the place. Yeah. So you can go to, I'm sure, their website, which I think is Atheists.
I think it's Atheists.ie or Atheists Ireland.
But if you Google Atheists Ireland, you'll find it, and no doubt they have it in their section. But yes, I'd warmly recommend it.
And the reason, by the way, that you'll find these events are Atheists Ireland is they seem to be the most active group.
Yes.
In terms of in the free thought community. If there are other groups out there, we are happy to plug your events.
Very
happy
to
plug them, because as we said, the primary objective for this is we want to make more free thinkers.
Absolutely. This is for the entire free thought community. It includes our atheist, humanist, secular, skeptic.
Don't have a name for
us. Don't have a name, just happen to be thinking freely and critically thinking.
If you want to make decisions based on evidence, you're in the right place.
You're one of us. One of us. Excellent. Okay, well, I think we'll probably leave it there, and we hope you enjoy MelodySheep, A Wave of Reason.
Fantastic. Excellent.
When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only, what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out?
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs.
In all of science, we're looking for a balance between data and theory. You don't have to delude yourself with Iron Age fairy tales.
The same spiritual fulfillment that people find in religion can be found in science by coming to know, if you will, the mind of God.
The real world, as it actually is not evil. It's remarkable. And the way to understand the physical world is to use science.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold. Teach a man to reason, think for a lifetime, think for a lifetime.
Cosmology brings us face to face with the deepest mysteries, with questions that were once treated only in religion and myth.
The desire to be connected with the cosmos reflects a profound reality. We are connected, not in the trivial ways that astrology promises, but in the deepest ways.
I can't believe the special stories that have been made up about our relationship to the universe at large. But look at what's out there. It isn't in proportion.
Science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold. Teach a man to reason, and he'll think for a lifetime, think for a lifetime.
Never let yourself be diverted by what you wish to be. What are the facts?
Enjoy the fantasy, the fun, the story, but make sure that there's a clear sharp line drawn on the floor. To do otherwise is to embrace man.
There is a new wave of reason sweeping across America, Britain, Europe, Australia, South America, the Middle East and Africa. There is a new wave of reason where superstition had a firm hold.
Teach a man to reason, and he'll think for a lifetime.